Buenos días a todos. Mi nombre es Christian Wolf, soy el director regional de Gensler. Quiero ante todo agradecerle a todos los participantes por buscarse el espacio para participar de este evento. La idea es darle 5 minutos al evento para que todos puedan llegar y comenzamos. Este es un evento que estamos organizando el CODI, que es el Consejo de Desarrolladores Inmobiliarios, con su grupo de innovación en conjunto con Gensler. Buenos días, espero que todos estén muy bien. Vamos a darle inicio al evento. En este evento, un poco lo que queremos conversar con ustedes o traer a la mesa es el ejemplo de continuidad de negocio en Singapur, y cómo Singapur se prepara para restablecer la confianza del usuario en sus industrias, servicios y comercio, con todo esto de la pandemia, el COVID-19. Para este evento tenemos el agrado de contar con la presencia de nuestro key speaker o guest speaker, que es Lawrence Lear, que es el director de diseño de la oficina de Gensler en Singapur. Es parte o es miembro del board de arquitectos de Singapur. Tiene un diploma de arquitectura en la Universidad de Londres y un bachelor en la Universidad de Singapur. Lawrence es reconocido como uno de los 20 arquitectos líderes menores de 45 años en Singapur. Tiene más de 15 años de experiencia profesional en UK y Singapur. En su carrera profesional ha realizado proyectos residenciales, educativos, religiosos, médicos, institucionales, de uso mixto, hotelero, de infraestructura, deporte y recreativo, y planes maestros tanto en Asia como en Europa. Es un ferviente creedor que la arquitectura viene de la mano con la responsabilidad social. Además, Lawrence es uno de los diseñadores de la corriente de Henderson, quien ha sido reconocido con numerosos premios durante su carrera, entre ellos el prestigioso President's Design Award y el Singapore Institute of Architecture Design Award. Por un lado tenemos a Lawrence y por el otro lado tenemos a nuestro prestigioso moderador, Edgar Mora. Edgar Mora, muchos de ustedes lo conocen, es nuestro estratega senior en Latinoamérica. Tiene una sólida formación política y cuenta con una maestría en Administración Pública en Harvard y un diploma de Planificación Urbana. Ha recibido múltiples premios por su profesionalismo. Con su liderazgo innato contribuye a nuestra comunidad de diseñadores y clientes a través de su enfoque reflexivo, metódico, enriqueciendo la experiencia humana. Edgar, todo tuyo.
Muchas gracias, Christian. Muchas gracias, Lawrence. Thank you very much, Lawrence, for being here with us. Tenemos un nutrido auditorio hoy y el tema está ya planteado. Aún en tiempos de crisis sanitarias severas como el actual, algunos pocos países en el mundo han tenido el beneficio de haber previsto algunas cosas que son fundamentales hoy día y poder, gracias a ese sentido de previsión que es metódico, que se puede repetir, tener continuidad en los negocios, tener continuidad en actividades, al menos hasta cierto punto, y hacer un traslado de sedes laborales, etcétera, de forma organizada. La continuidad de los negocios parece ser algo importante cuando nos enfrentamos a crisis sanitarias severas y crisis de cualquier otro tipo. Es un concepto poco conocido en nuestra región, en América Latina, y hemos querido pedirle a Lawrence, que está en nuestra sede de Singapur, que nos explique el caso de su país, cómo es que se ha continuado hasta el día de hoy con los negocios, a pesar de ser un lugar cercano al epicentro inicial de esta crisis sanitaria, cuáles son los factores que inciden en un plan nacional de continuidad de los negocios, cuál es la preparación que Singapur ha tenido previo a esto y cuáles son las oportunidades que están identificando para llevar adelante una nueva generación de propuestas que garanticen a la población su absoluta protección. So, Lawrence, we have a very nice group of people attending this meeting, this webinar. We are very pleased to have you here, and we are ready to learn about the Singapore experience. So this is your digital scenario. So please go on.
Thank you, Christian and Edgar, for introducing me. Hi, everybody. It's been great pleasure to meet all of you today on the other side of the world. Right now is 11 p.m. in Singapore, but it's great pleasure for me to share, or rather, to exchange ideas with you. I'm very grateful for, to have this opportunity to share with you what we're doing in Singapore. Well, tonight I'm going to talk to you about what some of the strategies for business continuity during COVID-19 and the Singapore experience. So Christian has already introduced me. I'm an architect in Singapore, working with Gensler, and I'm sure all of you know about Gensler. We're the #1 firm in the world and doing lots of great work. So I'm working in the Singapore office, which is the hub of the Asia Pacific office in Singapore in the region. So tonight I would like to share with you about 4 key things. So the first part is really about Singapore. For those of you who may not be aware of where Singapore is, I will share that with you and who are we, and some of the lessons learned from the past. Especially back in 2003, 17 years ago, we have this SARS crisis in the Southeast Asia. And looking at how we approach COVID-19 in today's terms, and eventually sharing with you some of the insights that we are coming up in Gensler. So briefly about Singapore, this is the map of Asia. You can see that Singapore is right over here, a little red dot, as everybody calls us. In fact, Singapore is also our Gensler hub for Asia Pacific region. And this is the map of Singapore. You can see that we are not a kind of a very big country. We are 55 years, and we are sovereign city-state and island country in maritime Southeast Asia. And our land area is only 725 square kilometers with a population of 5.3 million. We are the 7th highest GDP per capita in the world, and we have 91% home ownership by the people here. So Singapore is also the major hub for financial, shipping, air transit, and tourist destination. And this is one of the key, considerations whenever the government thought about what kind of measures that we need to put in place, especially in a pandemic situation like this. So in Singapore, we also have very high social indicators in education, healthcare, the quality of life, personal safety, and housing. So I'd like to share with you some of the lessons that we learned from the past, especially 17 years ago when the SARS pandemic happened in Southeast Asia, and it started off from Hong Kong. So during that time, about 238 people were infected and it killed 33 people. At that time, we are not prepared. The personal protective equipment was limited at that time because the world has never seen a virus like this. People were desperately scrambling to stockpile emergency supplies for themselves. The healthcare practitioners in Singapore were ill-prepared, which results in pretty bad outcomes. So since then, Singapore has learned our lessons and measures were instituted to prepare us for any future pandemic event. So what do we do post 2003 SARS? So when the outbreak started at that time, the Singapore government wasn't quite sure and they wasn't ready to put in place all the measures. So it took a while. There's a bit of delay for about 2 weeks before the government set up a kind of a task force to look into the issues. And from there on, I mean, post SARS, the government came up with this kind of like a outbreak response system coordination, which we call DOSCON, and it's color coded so that we show the current situation of disease outbreak. And the framework provides us with general guidelines on what needs to be done to prevent and reduce the impact of infection. So right now in Singapore, we are at a stage of orange. It has risen gradually from green about 2 months ago into the orange stage right now. So some of the lessons from the past is, looking at one of them is command control. So at that time, as I mentioned earlier, the response was slow, and the MOH task force was set up only 2 weeks later after the World Health Organization issued a global alert. But right now, in this current outbreak, a multidisciplinary or multi-ministry task force was formed on the same day when the first suspect case emerged. So it was jointly chaired by the Health Minister, the National Development Minister, and the task force comprises a cross-section of cabinet ministers spanning across various portfolios. So this time round, there is a very clear chain of command. In terms of the infrastructure and case management and isolation, back then we aren't ready. There weren't enough protocols in place, and there were a lot of procedures, policies, contact mapping, contact tracing. All these steps were not developed, and they were only started to be done only when the epidemic erupted. But since 2003, we have beefed up our healthcare and isolation capacity with new hospitals and a 330-bed National Center for Infectious Disease. So unlike during SARS at that time, we only have one centralized treatment hospital at Tan Tock Seng. Right now, 17 years later, all the public hospitals are capable of handling the COVID-19 virus today. There are also contingency plans which has been put in place too. So student hostels are converted into quarantine facilities in anticipation of more cases in the coming months. And also for today, most healthcare workers have their own, protective equipment and gear. And government actually placed the priority on the healthcare frontline workers. And this is one of the reasons why the government is, at the initial early stages, the government is not releasing any facial masks to the public. They are prioritizing the use for healthcare frontline workers. But of course, there are some changes in today's news. I will share with you that later. Singapore has moved into another phase today, but I would like to cover with you some of the things that we have done in the last 2 months. So the other point is about tricky balance in the face of uncertainties. The government has noted that overreaction imposed an unjustifiable burden on the country, potentially impacting normal daily routines and the livelihood of certain vulnerable segments of the population. At the same time, if you underreact, it will also lead to more extensive spread of the virus. So our strategy here is to be really flexible with the changing circumstances. For example, the plan recommends taking border control measures that will err on the side of caution, with more intense efforts until such time when the disease profile becomes clearer. The fourth thing that we did here is to handle the psychological crisis. We need more Singaporeans to be aware of the need to cooperate with the authorities during a health crisis. The government also reacted quickly to stop profiteering from businesses, especially people who are trying to sell the facial masks at very high prices. The government acted on it and stopped these businesses. And also, Singaporean has this mentality, they need to be kiasu. Kiasu means they will kind of start ignoring other people, or rather, they try to do things to protect themselves. So we have to stop that kind of unnecessary behavior of the people. So in that sense, the government tries a lot put in a lot of effort to make people feel that they are safe, and by putting in various measures, such as you can see this picture on the right hand side. We use technology to communicate with everybody so that everybody have a clear idea of the real situation rather than listening to fake news. Also, stronger legislation is very important. With the rise of social media, which is non-existent during the SARS, it can also give rise to disinformation that fuels further panic, as I mentioned earlier. So the government has also set up a new government act, a new law to protect protection from online falsehood and manipulation act is one of them. There's also an act that is implemented called the Infectious Disease Act that give authorities greater powers to enforce orders to fight a gazetted outbreak, such as using physical means to enforce a home quarantine order by bringing an absconder back to the place of isolation. So the last one is moral suasion and public communications. So over the longer term, legislative measures are less effective than instilling a voluntary sense of social etiquette and responsibility among the people. This is very important. You need the buy-in from the people to support you to carry out certain measures. So this really relies on public education as well as proper and accurate communication of risk, which is not always a guarantee considering the complex flow of information in a crisis situation like now. So quick dissemination and transparency is very, very important in any health emergency. And public reaction is hard to control, especially with fake news on social media. So you can see on this image on the right-hand side, this is actually an app that the government asks all the citizens to download. Every day there will be at least 2 to 3 messages from the government informing us how many cases are there, how many are imported, how many are community transmission. And you can see as of now today, this is actually the screenshot for the day. We have 1,049 cases, 21 are discharged and today, and 266 are discharged in altogether. And there are still about 464. So all these figures are very accurate, and that helps to dispel all the fears from the people. So I think I would like to come to the main topic about how Singapore approached COVID-19. What I'm going to share with you are some of the 4 key things that are happening over here. There are a lot of other measures that are being implemented and carried out, but because of due to the limitation of time, I'm just going to share with you some of these on a very high level kind of information. So if there's any more information you'd like to know, you can easily find on the internet as well, or you can contact us after this webinar. So one of the key measures that Singapore has put in place is about safe distancing. I'll click on this video here and let you see what is it about. All right. So on March 20th, the Ministry of Health announced a slew of distancing measures for public venues. So you can see in this photo here, there are a lot of stickers that are being placed on the tables to ensure that people are kept 1 meter away from each other. This started kind of 2 weeks ago. And this is implemented in all F&B outlets, retail stores and restaurants, including queues that you have to comply with this regulation. You can see in this photo over here, all the chairs are marked and nobody is allowed to sit on this area, because otherwise you will be facing a penalty, a fine of $6,000, fine of up to $10,000, or up to a jail sentence of 6 months, or both. So at the same time, the government also implemented measures to reduce the capacity within shopping malls and supermarkets. And you can see here, on the ground, everywhere is marked with this 1 meter distance segregation, so that people don't stand too close to one another. Even on escalators, you can see the marking asking you to stand at least 3 steps away. Public spaces, benches are all marked. And this includes reducing the number of entrances, deploying employees to control visitors entering and leaving the premises, and issuing tickets to visitors to ensure that the numbers do not exceed the mall's allowable capacity. It's almost like car parking. You go into a car park, you can see the number of cars in the car park, and that actually tells you whether the space is full or not. So this can be computed using the approved gross floor area of a shopping center's retail component, and based on 1 person per 16 meters square. So that is the guideline that the government set up. And you can see that the malls are also trying to limit the number of shoppers on their premise. They have to make sure that at least 1 meter spacing between persons standing in the queues, including those outside the premises. So the reduction of the number of entrances should not lead to a congregation of visitors outside the mall. And as a result, all the malls will only have 1 in and out at this point of time. This is a photo showing the example of a queue ticket. And that's how they actually track the number of people going to the mall. And stations are set up to measure your temperature and to ensure that you sanitize your hands before you enter the mall. So under the Infectious Disease Act, which will give legal force to the enforcers to make sure that people comply, business owners and event organizers who do not abide by these regulations may be jailed up to 6 months or fined up to $10,000 or both. So individuals who intentionally sit on demarcated seats as well will be facing the same penalty. So in summary, there are a number of measures that the government has put in place, and this is actually listed down in the table here below. So they include venues like malls, museums and attractions, tuition and enrichment centers, bars, entertainment venues. Religious services and congregations are all suspended. All events and mass gathering, example conferences, must be deferred or cancelled at this point of time. Private celebrations, birthdays and weddings are not allowed to be held in large numbers, not more than 10 people at any time. However, this rule has changed since 4 p.m. this afternoon. The Prime Minister has announced new measures, and some of these measures that we were asked to do earlier were superseded. So even funerals and wakes are also limited to not more than 10 people. So for workplaces, there are new measures that are being put in place today. Previously, we are asked to keep everybody 1 meter apart or as much as possible work from home. So in the case of Gensler, we are all working from home right now for the last 2 weeks. So the government has also noticed that in the central business district, only about 40% of the businesses are working from home. So starting next week, Tuesday onward, the government is enforcing 100% work from home scenario for all business, except for those that are conducting essential businesses. So the other initiative of the government is SG Clean. So it is actually a concerted action that is needed from everyone to elevate cleanliness and public hygiene standards and to make them the new norms. So this initiative was launched on the 16th of February, just about a month and a half ago. And the government wants to keep this idea of keeping clean culture, and this is a long-term strategy that the government wants to instill into the mindset of the people. You can actually visit a website over here and it tells you all about SG Clean. So the key focus is on 2 levels. Oh. Sorry, is there? Sorry. So for individuals, we are asking people to adjust to social norms, adopting good personal habits to help prevent community spread of COVID-19. So while SG Clean campaign will help to reduce public health risks from the current COVID-19 situation, we are looking at the longer-term objective to instill greater awareness of good hygiene and cleaning practices, so as to ensure that these are sustained at high levels even after the COVID-19 outbreak. So we're looking at everyone to play a part in keeping themselves and others around safe by adopting good personal habits. So it's all about social responsibility that we're trying to tell people here. So the government is also coming up with a series of posters to advise people what they should do in terms of practicing good hygiene, and what do you do when there are suspect cases, and how everybody can play their part. So these are very good materials that the government are putting out to help everybody, young and old, to really understand what is the issue and how can they be addressed. So at the same time, for business owners of premises, the government has also came up with this SG Clean Quality Mark. The purpose of this is to maintain a high standard of environmental public hygiene at their business premises. And so there are a list of, actually, there's a sector-specific checklist, meaning that if you look over here on the left, there are a series of businesses like hawker centers, schools, transport nodes, Singapore licensed hotels, shopping malls. So each one of these sectors have their own checklist, as you can see on the right. And that actually helps them to understand how they can maintain a baseline level of cleanliness and public hygiene in public spaces. So since this has been launched about a month ago, there are about 5,000 premises that are certified SG Clean. And that has been very, very successful within a short span of time. You can see the numbers over here. More than 95% of schools and premises under the Ministry of Education have been certified. 1 in 5 hawker stores and market store is certified SG Clean. So all these are happening within the 1 month that it has been rolled out since the start of the COVID-19 virus outbreak. So the third strategy that the government is putting in place right now is about home-based learning. So starting this week, the MOE has announced that all the primary schools will conduct home-based learning on Wednesday, secondary schools on Thursday, and junior colleges and the higher institutes on Fridays. So this week alone, some 200,000 primary students stay at home and followed different timetables set by the schools to enter the online learning system. So you can see here, students can log into the Singapore Student Learning Space, which is a digital online learning platform developed by the Ministry of Education. And students can enter at staggered times as informed by their teachers so that the internet traffic doesn't clog up the entire system. And the home-based learning combine both e-classes as well as completing assignments and worksheets. Even physical education classes were conducted online, for example, through YouTube videos. In fact, this one is actually my daughter's online learning screen, which I'm sharing here with you. So you can see that the government has started this online learning many years ago, actually, and that is actually to prepare, for this kind of pandemic one day that will come. So students are actually adapted very easily. The teachers can adapt very easily as well. So in this case, it's also a good chance to teach children self-directed learning and to test the online system at home. At the same time, you can see the teachers in this photo, they are communicating with students. During 2 days ago, actually, this photo was taken, and the student is on the other side at home. So the teachers are able to be creative and flexible in adjusting their lesson plans besides the core subjects, teachers are able also to come up with other interesting home-based activities such as character and citizenship education, as well as social studies for the students. At the same time, MOE also encourage parents to set up a routine with their children to study, meals, and rest timings, and to set aside an area conducive for learning such as dining table or study desk. But as I mentioned earlier, as of today, this 4 p.m., we are going to start full-time home-based learning starting next week, next Friday, in fact, next Wednesday, because of the rising case of the community spread. So the fourth strategy is actually looking at business continuity plans and managing operations. Enterprise Singapore worked together with Ministry of Manpower, came up with a guide on business continuity planning for 2019 novel coronavirus. And this can be downloaded from the Enterprise Singapore website. It provides employers who have not developed BCPs, a very good idea and step-by-step understanding how they can conduct business continuity in this crisis. Some of the suggestion or guidelines within the BCP, ask the employers to consider that, for your frontline staff, how do you actually consider splitting team arrangements? Perhaps, in the same department, somebody will work in the office, somebody will work from home, and the third part of the team will work in another location. So you can split your team into 3 equal groups so that, in the event one team goes down, we still have the other 2 teams safe and operating. So employers could also cross-train employees, to train them into new job scopes so that they can establish covering arrangements to minimize disruptions. What about backend staff? People who are not essential services, they can work from home. So in fact, you can see this screenshot. This is Gensler Singapore team working all from home. And we had great fun working at home, trying to make ourselves happy and making ourselves productive. So there are many ways we can do things when we work from the home and still remain productive. So employers also may wish to procure the necessary equipment and review their work processes to facilitate their employees to utilize flexible work arrangements. For example, bringing the work desk or the work chair or the monitor home so that they can actually work in a comfortable environment. I think these are very important things that matters during this kind of time, especially staff are working from home. And looking at temperature screening as well. So depending on the nature of the business and environment, employers may also consider measures such as control and lock access of visitors, customers to their workplaces with temperature screening wherever is necessary. So in general, the frontline staff who do temperature screening of visitors should don masks. So there should be also guidance to frontline staff what they should do if in the event they are unwell or if even they see customers who are unwell as well. So I'll come to the next section, which is about our insights. I think amidst all this pandemic, I think Gensler has also come up with some measures or some responses on how people can work from home and how the future can be changed because of this pandemic. So feel free to come and look at this websites, and you can find out more about our practice area leaders sharing with you all these new and interesting ideas. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Lawrence. We have a very nice group of 140 people listening to you, and I'm sure every one of us is very grateful with the information you have shared with us. So we have a question for you, and this is coming from some of those 140 people that is our audience today. And that question, it's something like this: multidisciplinary or interinstitutional actions have been placed on the Ministry of Health. In Singapore, have there been other successful examples of interinstitutional initiatives, or has this been an exception?
Okay, can I let me try to rephrase the question and understand. So you are asking that besides this unique crisis where the government work in the agencies in the different government the different agencies in the government work together, are there other instances where the agencies has ever worked together? Is that a question that you're asking?
Yes, I believe that is the questions.
Okay.
The question someone is asking. If there is a history of interagency cooperation,
Yeah.
this kind of circumstances.
There it's quite common, I mean, in Singapore for interagencies to work together. Besides this, there are other events, not just pandemics, but say, there are like some of the events that we hold in Singapore, like, F1 races. There are other situations when it comes to terrorism in Singapore. I think a few years ago, there were this terrorist threat from Indonesia. I think these are the situations where, it's not just one ministry working together. You need a group of people. And this is something that I think the Singapore government learned from the post-2003 SARS crisis. At that point of time, everybody thought, it's the responsibility of the Ministry of Health. But gradually they realized that, it can't be done without the support of all the other agencies, such as, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Manpower. And therefore, it is very important for the interagencies to be well prepared at any point of time. So I remember when I was serving in the Singapore Civil Defence Force many years ago, we always carry out interagency exercises, even during peaceful and normal times. And this is to ensure that we are operationally ready in any time of emergency, whether be it a health crisis, or be it a military crisis, or be it a big international event like F1. So there's always this requirement to be operationally ready. And so we always work with all the agencies across, from Ministry of Home Affairs, between the police and the firefighters and the ambulance services. So it's very important to practice all this during the normal time, so that when the emergency situation like this comes, we are well prepared to react, and react very quickly, just like what we are doing now.
Lawrence, we have another question, and this is, I will rephrase it. How do you manage in Singapore the social distance in public transportation, as people need to commute from one place to another, and this circumstance can be against the guidelines of social distance?
All right, so I think we manage it in few different levels. First of all, the government is advising people to work from home. So by doing so, we are able to reduce the number of people commuting to work. So as much as possible, we should be commuting from home, working from home. So for example, last week, the government said that, there were only about 40% of the businesses working from home. So we have about 60% in the central business district still working in their offices. So that already helps to reduce the number of people on the public transport. Secondly, the social distancing requirements also means that, for every 1 meter, or rather every alternate seat on the train, on the buses, you need to keep a distance. you're not allowed to be sitting side by side unless you're sitting with your immediate family members. So there is a regulation that has been put in place. Then that applies to the public transportation system as well. So I think thirdly is that the government is also advising people to stagger the time that they go to work. Employers are telling their employees that, look, instead of coming in at 8:30 in the morning, maybe you want to stagger your workforce, say coming at 7:30, 8:30, or 9:30. And that gives some flexibility to the staff to ensure that they do not travel during the peak hours. And we can actually help to spread the passenger load over the day. So these are some of the measures that we put in place in Singapore.
The third question is, what next steps do you plan to take in case the situation expands for a longer time?
Well, I'm not the government, but I think that's a very good question. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, the Prime Minister had a live broadcast this afternoon at 4 p.m. Informing the people in Singapore that the government is taking stronger measures now, starting from today, and it's going to be implemented over the next couple of days. So this is something that I couldn't put into the slide deck in time to share with you because it just came out through the news. So because of the, well, as you know, Singapore has already closed its borders pretty much, stopping all the transit visitors into Singapore. But what we are experiencing right now is that we are bringing back our citizens from abroad back to Singapore. So my understanding is that in the last couple of days, we are looking at about 1,200 people, Singaporeans or long-term pass holders coming back to Singapore through specially chartered flights by the Singapore government from Europe, from America, and from other countries. What it means is that we are going to see an increase in the number of imported cases because of the returns of fellow citizens and countrymen. And because of that, we saw quite a big spike in the number of confirmed cases from about 10 cases 2 weeks ago to about up to 70, 80 cases in one day in the last couple of days. The next thing that happened is that now we are experiencing a decrease in the number of import cases, but there's a rise in the number of local cases, which are unlinked. Unlinked meaning they can't be contacted in terms of tracing. That means they can't be linked to any clusters, and the government is still working very hard with the police force to detect and contact trace who are the people in the community that they have come into contact. So because of this situation right now, the government wants to ensure and to flatten the curve of infection and the number of confirmed cases. Why do we need to do that? Because there is a limit in terms of what the healthcare can do. Despite the fact that Singapore's healthcare is actually one of the top and the best in the world, the health system, in terms of the the kind of care that is given to patients, we have seen a lot of patients recovering in Singapore successfully. But we only have so many numbers of intensive care unit beds, about 300 over. What we don't want to have is a situation where the healthcare system cannot manage the spike in the number of cases. So in order to contain the situation, starting next Tuesday, the government is closing all offices. That means only essential services, essential businesses that can continue to operate. Otherwise, you have to close your office. Closing the office doesn't mean business closure, what the government is saying that you can work from home as long as the business can continue. All right. So the next thing that they implemented today is to have full home-based learning for the schools starting next Wednesday. So the tightening restrictions and movement of people is the ultimate intention the government is trying to achieve. And so that, people do not start socializing with one another beyond your household, especially the vulnerable ones like the elderly, because we have seen a lot of cases where the elderly gets infected, and they are one of those people that will suffer a lot. And so the government is telling us that only go out for essential things. Don't go out for social events. And this is in the spirit of minimizing contact, as simple as that. So F&B premises will still continue to operate. Shopping malls will still continue to operate. People can still go and buy things, but only for essential purposes. So the whole idea of the government is to really bring down the transmission numbers and to keep families safe and to protect the elderly. So every Singaporean has a part to play in that. Yeah, because I think the Prime Minister said today that, despite the measures that we have put in place in terms of social distancing, a meter, there will be bound to be some people who choose to ignore, right? And there'll be bound to have some people who choose to gather in larger than 10 number of people. So while the government can try to impose and legislate it, we just want to be very sure, to put in very decisive preemptive measures, or what we call circuit breakers, for the next 1 month, so that we can significantly bring down the number of cases and to stop the community spread amongst Singapore. So I trust that answered the question.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
Maybe we have very few time left, but we would like to learn more about the building industry. So has been impacted by these measures and guidelines? Is it still going on? The construction sites are open. What are the developers' reaction to the guidelines?
Okay. So there are a few. I'm hearing a few things today in the news. Prior to the news announcement today, all the construction sites are still going on as usual, business as usual. What the sites have done is that, we are following the guidelines of the government not to have more than 10 people congregating at any one point of time. So many of the sites has taken measures where we start to do what we call video conferencing through site meetings, and as much as possible, measures like hand sanitizers, personal protective equipment should be provided. Checking the temperature of the workers twice a day, and to ensure that the workers' dormitory are actually sanitized, and everybody are very mindful of the personal hygiene. So again, it comes down to this, the business employers making sure that the measures are put in place on job sites, as well as the individuals observing these guidelines and regulations that the government has advised. There are situations where because of the border closures in Malaysia and China, we are experiencing some shortage in terms of materials, for example, cement, bricks. And what the government is trying to do here to help businesses is that they are lifting off some of these requirements and helping businesses by providing rebates or incentives, and removing the interest payable under such circumstances, meaning that if you are taking a business loan or private loan, you can actually defer your payment till the end of the year. So I think as we speak, the government is coming up with new measures. There's actually a website that was launched, I think today, to talk about business continuity and what are the options that businesses can do moving forward. So I think that applies to construction sites and developers as well. But otherwise, I haven't seen my project, kind of being stopped. In fact, it is accelerating in some ways because they want to complete the project as soon as possible. But we are also telling them that we need to put the measures in place to ensure the safety of the health of everyone.
Thank you very much, Lawrence.
Yep.
This is time for me to switch to Spanish so I can do some of the conclusions, but basically being grateful to our attendees and also also thank to CODI, which is the Chamber of Developers here, that is the one that is hosting this event. Muchas gracias a todos por esta participación, a CODI en particular, por ser nuestro anfitrión. Queremos seguir adelante en Gensler trayendo conocimiento de nuestros puntos de negocio a esta situación que nos tiene a todos atentos a las medidas que puedan establecerse para generar la continuidad de los negocios. Creo que un takeaway importante, una lección que nos deja la experiencia de Singapur, sin lugar a dudas, es que la continuidad de los negocios es producto de un plan previo. Este concepto que Lawrence nos traslada de reacción y reacción es muy relevante, pero tiene que estar fundamentado en un plan, y creo que esto es una tarea que tenemos en el futuro, todas las partes de la sociedad costarricense, ponernos de acuerdo sobre un plan de continuidad de los negocios que nos permita afrontar este tipo de crisis sin tanta incertidumbre como hemos venido teniendo durante estos días. Thank you very much, Lawrence, for your participation. It has been a pleasure to have you here. And I just want you to know that we are going to upload the video of this meeting, of this webinar, to our own channel, Gensler TV, that we are going to inaugurate in YouTube. So thank you very much for your cooperation and your collaboration. Thank you. Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias a todos y los esperamos en un próximo webinar. Thank you, Lawrence.
Thank you. Thank you very much.